Dad grabbed the stone and his face turned into a mask of anger I'd never seen before. He threw it and told me we were leaving right now. I found it on a trail like any other. The mountain was quiet that day. Wind in the pines. My sister wasn't with us. She hated hiking. I thought it would be a cool gift for her. That's what I told myself when I picked it up. It didn't look like a stone exactly. It was the size of a paperback. Flat. Gray with carvings worn by weather or time. The lines looked like letters but not like any I'd seen. They felt wrong to my eyes. My fingers tingled when I touched it like the stone had a pulse. The air changed the instant I had it in my hand. The bird stopped like someone hit mute. My dad's face when he saw it is burned into me. He went pale. Then he went red. He snatched it away and threw it as far as he could. He grabbed me and said one thing, "We go. Now." We left the way we came, fast. My heart hammered. My dad's hands shook on the wheel. I asked him why. He didn't say a word. He glared at the forest like it had betrayed him. When we got home, he avoided my questions. Sometimes he pretended not to hear. Other times he said he didn't remember. Years later I asked him about it again. He gave me the same blank look. Then he said flatly, "Don't go there." Not a suggestion. Not a warning. An order that sounded like it had been carved into him. I still have nightmares about that stone. In some dreams I can hear it humming, a low, patient sound that wants to be read. In others, when I try to speak about it, my words come out as the same strange shapes carved into its surface. What would you do if something called to you from the earth? Would you pick it up or walk away and pretend you didn't hear it? Because that night as we left the mountain, I could have sworn something watched us from the trees. Something patient. And that's when I realized, my dad had seen it before I was even born. Next, the kind of small moment that makes you rethink every creak in your house. Story 2, the face in the bathroom. I swore I saw half a face peeking from my bathroom doorway, but when I turned the light on, the room was empty. I was 12 or 13. It was early winter. The sky grew dark by 6. I'd been out with a friend. I pulled into the driveway and the house smelled like nothing, empty like a breath held too long. My parents were gone. The place was mine for the night. You walk in and you're in the living room. The kitchen on the right. The hallway on the left. My room straight at the end. I didn't turn on lights. That path is so familiar you could navigate it blind. Halfway down the hall I froze. From the corner of my eye, a shoulder, a partial face, white in the dark for a second, as if someone stepped through a seam in the night. I did what people do when they think they see something. I ran to it. I flicked the bathroom light on. My heart was already a fist in my throat. The whole room showed up at once. White tiles, a toothbrush, towels on hooks, nothing else. No shadow, no figure, no damp footprints on the mat. I searched. I pulled out drawers. I checked the closet. Nothing. The house kept breathing in the quiet that followed. But something had been there. I felt it in my skin. A curl of cold against my neck. The bathroom mirror fogged for a breath, then cleared like nothing had happened. I never told my parents. I didn't want to freak them out. I didn't want them to laugh or worse to start watching me the way they watched the TV at night. But I started sleeping with the door closed. I started checking the hall twice. Years later, I learned my neighbor's house had an old chestnut tree that scraped along our roof. I learned how noises can make shapes in your brain. I learned the difference between a prank and a presence. So which was it? Tree or person? My brain or something else? And that's when I realized, the face I'd seen was looking at the wrong mirror. Next, a night shift where coffee doesn't keep the dark honest. Story 3, night shift at the gas station. The man at 3 a.m. started buying gallons of water, but his eyes were fixed on the tape recorder in the corner, and he knew my name. I took the graveyard shift at the station because I needed cash. Small hours are honest like that. They pay you in silence and extra dollars. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered. The night felt like a long throat. People on night shifts aren't people in the same way. They're more like caravans passing through. Truckers. Drunk barflies. Night walkers. They have stories, bad or worse. At 3:14 a.m. a man came in. He was ordinary at first glance. Jacket, hat, tired face. He kept glancing at the security camera, the little dome in the corner. The one most nights I didn't bother to check. He bought 2 gallons of water, jerky, and a roll of duct tape. He didn't smile. He didn't speak much. When he handed over the cash he said my name like he'd known it my whole life. Not from the name tag. Not from the register. "Hey," he said. "You look like you should sleep more." I told him I didn't have time. He smiled then. The smile didn't reach his eyes. He said, "You'll have to be careful here. Not everyone leaves what they bring in." I laughed it off, a nervous edge. But later, when I checked the playback, the camera had a blank patch of 5 minutes. The dome recorded everything else. Trucks, the bell, rain hitting the awning, but from 3:10 to 3:15 the room was a smear. Like smoke on the lens. The man's footsteps on the recorder were muffled. The tape hissed in the silent part. It sounded like whispers washing underwater. And when the camera image returned, the man was gone. No door chime, no truck pulling away. Nothing. The next week another regular said the station used to be a different place. Years ago someone stayed past the storm. People said they saw a man on the surveillance who should not have been there. I quit 2 weeks later. The other cashier said she found a duct tape roll behind the toilet. The water bottles were untouched. The register had a scratch in the drawer like a name. What would you do if you watched hours of your life erased on a screen? Would you keep working? Would you sleep with one eye open? And that's when I realized, the camera wasn't only watching us. It was saving something in the dark. Next, a neighbor who knows too much. Story 4, the neighbor's key. My neighbor slipped me a spare key with a smile like a secret. He said, "If you ever need someone, use it." I used it once. I never used it again. We moved into the house for cheap rent. Old place. Cheaper neighbors. The kind who wave across hedges but look through you. He knocked on my door on a Tuesday and handed me a key. Brass. "That's for you," he said casual. "If you're late, lockouts happen. Use it before you call a locksmith." He winked like he was doing me a favor. He left the porch light on for the week after. I kept the key in a shoebox under my bed. It felt like a talisman, small, heavy, a secret with teeth. 2 months and I came home hammered from a night I didn't remember much of. My key didn't work. It stuck in the lock like it was swollen with rain. I panicked. The neighbor was watching from his window shades. He pushed the door and said, "You left it unlocked last night." I had not. He offered the spare with a small, almost apologetic smile. He said, "You should be careful. I've seen someone looking at your window at night." You sounded like a friend. I felt grateful. I took the key and left. I used it rarely. The house felt colder after that, as if the walls had learned to breathe with strangers. Then things escalated. At night I'd wake to my bedroom door slightly ajar. The radio would be tuned between stations, static bleeding. Once, my copy of a photograph I loved was face down on the carpet. No footprints. No forced lock. I considered the neighbor again. He'd always be watering plants when I left in the morning. He'd wave at me leaving for work like he did it every day. He'd be the friendly man who knew where my spare key was kept. So I started to set the camera. Mostly to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. The footage showed little things. A creak in the hallway at 1:02 a.m., a shadow on the landing at 2:13 a.m. Nothing dramatic. But on one night's playback, a door opens and a figure moves through the living room. The timestamp blinked 3:33 a.m. The movement was slow and deliberate. Then the figure stops and looks directly at the camera. It wasn't my neighbor. He had short hair. The figure in the footage had no face you could read. It had a smear where a face should be. The next frame the figure walked out the front door. No sound of a lock. No footsteps on the porch. I showed the footage to my neighbor. He smiled. And said, "You shouldn't leave doors open." Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And that's when I realized, he'd given me the key because he already had the lock. Next, an abandoned place that remembers you. Story 5, the school that wouldn't close. Every light in the building turned on at once. I heard the chairs scrape like an audience settling in. The school shouldn't have been awake. I worked nights as a cleaner at an old elementary school. Summer contract. The floors were cheap linoleum that shined when wet. The classrooms smelled of old glue and chalk dust. The janitor's closet held more keys than sense. They said the school had been built in stages. Wings added and abandoned like appendages. Kids' laughter hung in the corners even when the halls were empty. One night at 2 a.m., I was mopping the art room. I hummed under my breath. The radio played a dull station. The floor squeaked. Then the hallway light, 8 bulbs down the corridor, snapped on as if someone had thrown a switch. I froze with the mop like a weapon. There's a feeling when you know you are not supposed to be alone. The classroom doors all stood open. A breeze moved paper on a teacher's desk. No AC. No open windows. Then a sound like chairs scraping at the far end of the hall. At first I thought night maintenance. But the scraping kept going like 100 chairs being pulled back at once. It grew closer. I told myself it was rats. I told myself the building had pipes. I kept mopping, but every nerve in me starlit. The mop head hit the floor and made a hollow sound. At the end of the hall, the auditorium doors creaked open. A smell like old varnish and breath hit me. The stage lights were up. Not bright. A soft glow. Someone sat in the front row. One person. Upright. So, I crept forward. The seat was empty. But in the center aisle, footprints had been tracked into the dust. Small like a child's. They led up the aisle onto the stage and stopped at the center. On stage, chalk had been drawn onto the wood. Little shapes. Names. Dates. The handwriting looked like a child writing in a sloppy hand. One name was underlined twice, the same name as my high school teacher. My throat closed. I ran. I left the bucket and the mop. I bolted through the side exit and didn't stop until the parking lot lights blurred behind me. I didn't go back that week. I didn't tell anyone. Partly because what would I say? There were footprints but no person? Weeks later, my supervisor handed me a notice. The board had voted to tear down the wing. Renovation. As they did, the workers found a child's desk shoved in a crawl space. Inside was a class photo with one face scratched out. A teacher's name scrawled on the back, the one I knew. The year on the photo was 30 years ago. What haunts a building more stubbornly? Memory or those who were erased from it? And that's when I realized, the school didn't forget the children. The children only forgot to leave. Next, the late-night drive that followed me home. Story 6, the drive that didn't end. I drove home and thought I was alone, until the car behind me flashed its lights in a pattern that matched my childhood nightmares. It was a short drive. 10-15 minutes maybe. Cold month. The highway narrowed at the old mill. The radio stayed on low. I'd had a simple night out. I wanted only to sleep. Halfway home a car tailed me. At first I thought it was coincidence. It stayed too close. A pair of headlights like eyes. I changed lanes. It changed too. It paralleled me like someone practicing moves in a mirror. At a light, I glanced over. The driver looked at me with a blankness I couldn't read. No expression. The kind faces get when people are thinking about something else. I felt a hitch of irritation. Tailgaters scare me. I took the next exit. So did the car. My stomach tightened. I kept my speed normal, drove like someone obeying all laws to avoid escalation. When I slowed at a red light, it slowed. When I sped, it sped. The car's headlights were a steady pulse in the rear view. Then it started to flash. One long. Two short. One long. The exact rhythm of the Morse code I'd once learned as a kid in Scouts. Something burned into me as a nervous habit. The pattern felt deliberate. I felt like I was being read aloud. At the next stoplight, my phone vibrated. One message. No sender. A single word, stay. I slammed my foot on the gas and took a side street. The car followed. We weaved through neighborhoods like a slow predator. My hands were numb on the wheel. The radio fritzed. The GPS blinked, recalculating like a bad joke. I pulled into a supermarket lot and sat with the engine idling, thinking if I waited long enough maybe they'd go. The lot was empty except for my shadow and the pale glow of a street lamp. The car pulled in beside me. The driver's window stayed up. No one left the vehicle. The pattern of their light flashed again. One long, two short. One long, two short. I left the engine running and walked inside. I told no one. I bought 2 energy drinks and practiced breathing in an aisle of frozen peas. When I came out, the car was gone. No tire marks. No footprints. My notes on the dash were rearranged. Someone had turned the little paper compass I kept face down. My phone had one more message. A photo this time. A photo of my house from the street. Taken from the right side. The timestamp, 5 minutes ago. I moved that night. I didn't tell friends. I changed locks. But a month later, on a rainy night, I saw headlights across the road again, paused, then turned and drove away like nothing happened. What do you do when the road behind you learns your name? And that's when I realized, someone was mapping my life in headlights and numbers. You've listened to strangers, to stone, to late shifts and scraping chairs. You've sat with people who apologized for reasons you can't fathom. You watched a camera skip 5 minutes and decided it was easier not to know. All of these are small things. Small enough to shrug off when the sun is high. But horror doesn't always come from what screams. It comes from the way normalities bend. From the client who knows your name. From the man at the bus stop who says, "I'm sorry," like a ritual. From a father who will not explain why he flinches at a mountain's name. From a face that appears in a bathroom for one heartbeat and is gone when you turn the light on. We like to think that evil hides in shadows. It does not. Evil hides in the pauses between sentences. In the keys someone slips you with a smile. In the camera that refuses to record. In the headlights that learn your route. In the stone that calls out from the earth and the man who remembers that you were there. So before you lock your door tonight, ask yourself this. Who is keeping your spare key? Who has been watching your windows while you slept? How many small apologies have been written down for you without your knowing? If you ever find something on a trail that hums like a book, throw it away. If you see a face in the dark, don't run forward. Look for the second light. Don't let people keep your keys. Don't work the graveyard shift for the extra cash. Don't sit on a bench with a stranger who says, "I'm sorry," and walks away. And what about the stone? What do you think it could have been? Was it carved by a person or carved by time? Was my dad protecting me, or protecting us from something that remembers us with hunger? You decide. Drop a comment. Tell me which story made you sleep with the light on. What would you do if this happened to you? Because here's the last thing I'll say, and I want you to feel it in your teeth when the music fades. Evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in people we see every day. And that's when I realized, sometimes the thing watching you is the one who used to bring you cookies. End.